This video is sponsored by North Dakota Housing and Finance Agency. For more information, check out ndhfa.org. And also Great Plains Housing Authority, greatplainsha.com. Welcome to HQS to Inspire, the updated inspection process for HUD-supported housing units across the country. A disclaimer: the inspection information is subject to change by HUD and/or Congress, as these processes are not finalized, but hope to be finalized by 2021. The inspections. HUD conducts many different inspections. Those inspections include the housing quality standards for voucher programs that also cover home programs, the REAC inspections that cover public housing units, and other types of inspections. Those inspections will be combined into one, as we'll talk about. But these various types of inspections make it very confusing for an inspector or a person looking for housing or a community. So are you confused yet on all those different inspections? You could be very confused if you're a person that does all those inspections. Thankfully, Congress mandated HUD to implement a single inspection protocol for public housing and voucher units. So why change? The old versus the new. Congress mandated HUD to update the housing quality standards to reflect current advances in home inspections and the modernization of standards for health and safety threats in homes today. Through this initiative, HUD aims to clarify and streamline inspection processes for public housing authorities and inspectors while increasing owners and tenants' access to detailed information about their homes. What this means is that HUD is moving to a process that will continually improve the unit health, but also change the inspections over time without needing to go through a revision every 30 years. One of the bigger components of the new inspection process will allow the housing authorities to develop and send out a report to the owners and tenants that is the same, that goes through and will clearly identify any fails or any risks, not only with the code and information related to that failure, but also with pictures. So why change? Congress wants a single inspection process. This is a good change. After going through various reviews of what a single inspection should look like, Congress brought in several experts who are building experts, firefighters, emergency responders, and contractors to look at what is a healthy unit and what we should be reviewing as inspectors. Congress also wants data on the inspections. Currently, Congress can only see if an inspection was ever done through a client record. Congress would like to see how many inspections were done, what the fails were. They can look at a specific city, they could look at a state, and take a look at what things may fail, if there's a common reason for it, if there are things that need to be improved. Congress and other agencies also realize that having access to stable and affordable housing reduces healthcare costs, not only for that individual, but for the community. HUD Secretary Dr. Ben Carson believes that a housing unit health has an enormous effect on personal health. He witnessed unit health issues firsthand as a doctor in Baltimore and often references those issues in his speeches. Dr. Carson grew up in public housing and understands the enormous deterioration of public housing units and what has happened to the people that rely on those units. Dr. Carson is trying to help with revitalizing those units by utilizing opportunity tax zones and some other programs created by the federal government. He's also encouraging local and state communities that come up with various resources, and also looking at the opportunities for communities to opt out of public housing and other housing programs. Again, why change? Change is hard. It's difficult. It takes time. Change is scary, perhaps especially when it is good for us. That sometimes is related to that we are having to change our own processes, as it is easy for us to point out how someone else should change, but when we have to look at how our own inspections, how our own operations may change, that is a difficult and introspective change. However, the end result is a much more cohesive vision of inspections and a much better improved health for those residents. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. Socrates. And this is a very essential quote. When we're thinking about what it is a change, whether it is a community or if it is a business or higher education or something to do with housing or healthcare, building something new for the future generations, building something new looking at how it may impact an elementary school student in the future years is what we need to be focusing on, not the argument of the way we used to do it, or I didn't get that, or many of the not in my backyard type scenarios. We also need to be looking at the education that rehab and renovation are possible, and that many of those fighting the change would be better off spending their time applying to find those funds and resources than to complain about the change. Again, one of the examples that we have heard many times over in different presentations is that the poor quality housing units cost millions more in healthcare and other assistance than it would to just improve the units. In a recent conference, HUD discussed the implications of a child that had asthma because of the unit they were living in had poor air quality. Because the parents were receiving housing assistance, it is a good assumption that they are probably hourly workers, which means that they had to leave work, lose pay, to take the child to a doctor, and then probably pay more because of the type of insurance they have to get the care for that child, for the medications. That child had to lose time at school. If this happens too many times, those parents could lose their jobs because they are hourly workers and easily dismissed by employers. It's why we need to look at, are there better ways to improve the unit health that overall improves everybody's health and a community's health? This is often this slide or this picture, what if we don't change at all and something magically just happens? Is often what happens, or the thought process that is happening with many old businesses that believe that, well, we've been in business for many years. We don't need to change. Customers will still find us. That's not the case. That's not the case of what has happened with Sears and Kmart. They didn't change. They didn't change to the times. They didn't improve the look of their stores. They didn't improve the look of their inventory. And now many of those stores are closed. The same thing happens with grocery stores. It happens with major businesses. It happens with housing. If you don't improve your stock, people move on to another place. They move on to another community. It's important for our communities to invest. It's important for our landlords to invest and to change and to make those investments into proper units that have good unit health. Lately, there's been a lot of news regarding housing units and the conditions. NBC Nightly News had several stories, including that more families live in housing that fails and fails health and safety inspections. And this was a featured news story on NBC Nightly News that did even investigate the issues that came up as people got extensions, landlords got extensions and extensions and extensions, and never did fix the issues. But the tenants are continuing to live in conditions that are extremely poor. Housing Authority and HUD officials discuss public housing units. This actually goes through an interesting concept in which a HUD official was living in HUD subsidized and public housing units to be able to experience what is happening and the conditions that were going on and how things can improve. But also visiting directly with those housing authorities to find out how some of the administrative side of things are going. Another long article or news story on NBC Nightly News was that carbon monoxide is killing public housing residents and that HUD does not require detectors. And that is true. On the current HQS housing quality standards, carbon monoxide detectors are not required. However, in defense of the story, it is not required. However, in many places, code required it for many decades. And so depending on the community could have been enforcing those codes. Not necessarily the housing authority or the public housing unit, but the community can actually have a stronger code than what is required by HUD. That story actually was in a very detailed article that was online. It runs a lot longer regarding the silent killer of carbon monoxide. Ben Carson has also been featured on Bloomberg and other networks talking about the opportunity zone and helping invest in those units. There's also been some talk about the HUD inspection process and enforcement reform in many other states. And this federal and city crackdown on some subsidized units that have not been kept up. And what cities can do as they look at that their zonings and their ordinances actually can be stricter. Since a property is in there, it is only that the inspection applies to the program or program related issues. The building still has to comply with code. HUD is weighing tougher inspections of public housing after complaints and substandard conditions. Again, another NBC News article and some additional articles on the carbon monoxide and the article on the failing health with YouTube links. There's been other news stories about apartments filled with rats, roaches, toxic mold, and toxic mold in some places is not considered a public health issue. It might be considered a health issue, but it might not be considered a public health that warrants any type of investigation or cleanup. Again, there's more. The Atlantic had an article in June of 2015 on how housing policy is failing America's poor. Roaches and leaks, inspections reveal shocking conditions of U.S. funded housing. This is from Talking Points memo. The Arizona or AZ Central reporting on housing conditions for Native Americans much worse than the rest of the U.S. And lawmakers say HUD is complicit in inhumane conditions at Hartford housing projects. That article was after lawmakers toured many of the housing projects and then reported back to HUD on what they had seen. In Jacksonville, HUD is relocating people after life-threatening conditions at housing units. The Southern Illinoisan reporting on HUD's defective inspection process, allowing ramshackled housing to fester for many years. And this is 2017. An additional article on Ralston regarding shutting down buildings and possible options. Including in areas nearby that the Fargo high-rise will be knocked down and land to be redeveloped after the Fargo high-rise has been deemed unfixable due to the deteriorating conditions there. Bismarck is looking to assist renters in facing unsafe housing after many landlords have not been keeping up on codes or been renting units that are substandard and do not meet even fire safety. In Minot, the issue has been that people have been living in a closed hotel without any water, and this was in June of 2019. And as that one closed, to keep people out, another one closed as well. That had housed other people, again, as something that was temporary. Well, it started as temporary, but became permanent housing for those folks. There are many current issues as well that we look at with inspections. The HQS, or Housing Quality Standards, is something that is past due for a large revamp. It's paper-based format with a checklist, and so many inspectors just walk through with the checklist, either look at the checklist and just check it off, or just check the whole thing down. The full report is 19 pages long, and none of that report goes back to the landlord. The housing authority is supposed to be reporting back to the landlord and the tenant on what the conditions are. However, some of that is hard to follow, and it might not actually give a good description. It's used for vouchers, home, and other HUD funding. Its concern is everything working rather than is it safe and healthy? It's also a very inconsistent inspection process, as it is always subject to the person that is doing the inspection. So some people may spend more time looking at does the windows open and close versus a person that looks at are the smoke detectors all working? Are there trip hazards? Or another person that may look more at the paint conditions. That same inconsistency happens with quality control varying issues. If you have a person who's coming in with doing quality control inspections, those inspections will change every year or every time that the housing authority has those quality control, and shows different items that may need emphasis rather than the overall picture. And there's no reporting to HUD. HQS only reports back the dates within the system to HUD. It does not report on the unit health. It does not report on the actual fails. It does not report on any improvements being done. Some of the other issues that we actually see is that how townships handle inspections. So if something is built outside of a city or an area where there is an inspector, townships may actually just have a township officer who has no building experience sign off on the inspections. We've also seen some city inspections where that allow the contractor to verify that things were built properly. And of course, that leads to a whole lot of other conflicts in itself. There are many cities that have code and pass code, but never enforce code or never enforce building permits as well. So there's the need for more inspectors, as that becomes a more difficult process for housing authorities to enforce. This is no longer something that a person is qualified to do as a very part-time job. They need to understand what is needed in an inspection. We also understand that there is very tight community budgets, as many communities are searching for other revenues and increasing taxes to be able to hold their own base. And whether or not that, there are some communities that could employ or utilize their current building inspectors to help cover HUD inspections. The communities often are missing the reporting mechanisms. There's also some issues with unclear century code on trailers and trailer homes. North Dakota has no ordinances on drug cleanup. This is especially true on meth cleanup, in that there is no ordinance on how it needs to be cleaned up, and that a person can actually end up, the next renter can end up in legal issues because of that. It can cause a lot of health issues, obviously, but if there was a police presence at that unit and the drugs were detected, that person could end up being arrested for manufacturing of drugs, despite that they would not have done it because of the improper cleanup. The local communities and townships can enforce code violations with fines or even pull a certificate of occupancy. And communities have the legal and moral authority to enforce their building conditions. And this helps create vital, vibrant communities. There are a few programs that help with rehab. Again, rehab is one of those things where it's going to require full compliance with code, and probably a lot more paperwork and reporting back than landlords or owners would prefer. The existing programs are difficult, and there are many programs being developed. And some of the owners may have little or no equity to be able to invest, which then creates for higher interest rates, or they may be denied for any of the programs. HUD subsidized or USDA subsidized programs also control that rent, and so that the landlords or the owners can't reinvest to enhance. It also means that they're sometimes not able to cover their own admin. As a result, we've seen hundreds of units leave those HUD subsidized programs and USDA subsidized programs, and that exits out a critical component for those communities. There is a big need for new state and local enhancement programs. There is a need for enforcement on safety and health issues. And there's only a few testing places or testing people that can go after lead-based paint and look at rural areas, but also urban areas where lead-based paint may still exist. Housing authorities also need to be much more open about working with the local communities and reporting any code violations to that legal authority. So, and many times it is the city or the city building inspector. If you understand or you see that somebody is renting an apartment that has no fire egress, then it should be reported to the city. It should be reported to the fire department, as the landlord should not be renting out that apartment. HUD has provided little information as to these inspection changes and what's going to happen. There are some places online that give information, and there are some trainings that have been done. HUD made some presentations in April 2018 in Bismarck as part of the North Dakota Housing and Finance Conference. The training is being conducted at demonstration sites for housing authorities. Although the training is typically done with some of these core groups that have helped develop the new standards, the UPCSV, and that training is usually only a day, or if not less than that. Those housing authorities that are a part of the demonstrations will be the ones that help train all other housing authorities. There are companies that are offering different trainings, but they may not have the expertise. As we had found out in North Dakota, a company had offered to do the UPCSV training before UPCSV was even approved, and the training actually went through and showed how to cheat some of those systems, did not report correctly on what the systems look like, and excuse me, then looked at other reporting mechanisms that never came about. That training passed everybody regardless, not actually going through any units, and cost everybody quite a bit of dollars. So those trainings are going, and they're being offered throughout the Midwest. This is a little bit of an intro to UPCSV. This is the new demonstration inspection process for vouchers. UPCSV is Uniform Physical Condition Standards for vouchers. It is a replacement for HQS. This helps solve some current issues of accuracy that different inspectors are arriving at the same result each time. We want to make sure that whoever is going through the inspection will always be the same. Consistency. There are decision trees and branching logic that help make a decision whether or not something is a fail. That removes the ability to say yes or no without actually giving a reason. The decision trees will walk a person through it. HUD is providing some training and some quality control for the program. The objectivity. The inspections conducted using a defined set of criteria. And the improving inspections, training, and compliance. HUD wants all of these things to be improved upon, and by utilizing this type of system, it should, as it removes many of the common issues created by having a paper system and an outdated inspection system such as HQS. UPCSV was developed by building inspectors, firefighters, contractors, health professionals, and housing agencies. At this time, there's over 180 public housing authorities trained. Pilot agencies will help train other agencies and communities and landlords as inspections go live. HUD is still looking for more pilot agencies. So if your housing authority is interested, you are able to contact HUD and become a pilot agency. The new pilot agencies must use your own electronic devices. So as long as you have a agency issued tablet or phone that you're able to use that app on there. Agencies cannot use the alternating annual inspections. So it can't be a process of where you're doing inspections every other year. Once you are on UPCSV, because it is a demonstration, they want you to do the inspection every year. That way that we can see the consistent data and reporting coming back. HUD wants us to look at protocol versus policy, trading in devices, test and analyze the UPCSV, and provide the tech support. The public housing authorities need to have the executive director behind and looking at the new inspection protocol and how to demonstrate it and utilize it, and understand the need for the new inspections. So that a housing authority must be willing to participate and do those inspections. This might require housing authorities to double enter the inspections in different software. As a UPCSV is the HUD software, it may not go over with whatever software, housing software, an agency is using. And you must conduct the inspections, get any feedback, and provide feedback to HUD. The UPCSV is an electronic inspection. There are no paper forms. This question has been asked many times. There are no paper forms. In fact, even trying to come up with the decision trees and follow that, you will be looking at hundreds of pages of information. The inspection is a software called Exam for Inspection. It's an app based on Salesforce platform, which is extremely private and encrypted and is extremely versatile. The app works on Android and iOS devices. And if a picture is taken within that app for the inspections, it is held within that application only and not on the device. And there's also the web-based inspection platform as well. HUD must provide housing authorities with a low barrier entry to the software. And so you can use the web-based inspection platform as well. UPCSV uses International Building Code. Code is an easy standard for communities and housing authorities to base the results. This means that we are looking at things as code as now, not when the structure was built. And where communities often are at a disagreement is that they will look at, well, if the house was built or the apartment was built in 1970, we look at the codes of 1970. HUD is saying it should meet things as of now. So in order to receive those federal subsidies, it needs to be meeting that code. And that helps keep these the inspection process updated without having to go through and do a mass update every 10, 15 years. It is actually something that should constantly be updated and followed through. The federal inspection must follow the federal standards. A housing authority can request to have a local requirement, but it will not be in the software. Local requirements must be something that are approved in the admin plan and approved by HUD. Again, the software is something that is looking at the overall picture. If there is a local standard that then the housing authority must watch for and write that up on their own. An example that the UPCSV team described was one of the few places to have required screens for vouchers. Window screens is in Florida. That is something that we should see all over. If there is a window that is requiring the screen should be there and should be functioning and non-torn. But it's not going to necessarily show up in that software. The decision tree logic will bring people into different items and determine if there's a fail or a safety hazard. An inspector can still write up a safety concern if there is one. All failures require pictures. This is a big change. The picture gets tied to that failure, that item, and it will branch out and give what is called a breadcrumb. So it'll actually show where that failure was under which items within the UPCSV logic. Those pictures become part of that process and part of that information sent on to HUD as well for data collection. So it is important to understand that when your person is taking pictures, to take a picture of the fail so that you can see where the fail is and what is it, but to try to keep out as much personal background as possible. So try not to get pictures, try not to get the person involved or their mail or whatever else. Make sure to try to take those pictures in a way that does not identify personal identifiable information. There are 5 inspectable areas: the site, the building exterior, building systems, common areas, and unit. These all go through a whole lot of other, they get each branched down as a person goes through them. And we're going to take a quick look at the HUD UPCSV software. Now, all software providers that are housing software providers will have the option to create their own UPCSV software, but it must follow the decision trees, or they can find ways to implement this within their own software. Again, it's an electronic inspection. A person is going to be required to put in the unit information, unit address, unit city, number of bedrooms, and there are some unit health questions. When a person looks at this, this is the main screen. There's the unit. There's the inspection number. It has whether the generated number and the date. There's the fundamental requirements, the unit, the site, the building systems, common area, building exterior, and health and safety. And everywhere you go, you see this little circle that's got a thumb up and a comment box. And that's if there is something that you like or dislike to be able to notify HUD. If you were to open those up, each one pops up and they have a box OD, and that is the defects. And so you were to go through and find each one under those categories. So under unit defect, there's plumbing, electrical, structure and finishes, cabinets, countertops, appliances, life safety equipment, heating, cooling, and ventilation. If we're looking under life safety equipment, we're going to see smoke detector, carbon monoxide detector, combined smoke and carbon monoxide detector. Carbon monoxide detectors are required in any unit that has an open flame. So any unit that may have a natural gas furnace, oil, propane, may have that for water heat or cooking. A carbon monoxide detector is required. It has been required in International Building Code for decades. So if we look at it, we say that the carbon monoxide detector is going to come down and say missing or does not function. If we say it does not function, it's going to require us to take a photo, add some comments, and if it's a fail, we take a picture of it, it adds it in there, and then we can record it. So we also can look at the site defects, and the site defect has a whole lot of areas. Again, this is going to come down to what HUD wants you to look at for the health and safety. There are some system defects, such as domestic water, elevators, emergency power, fire protections, and sanitary systems. Common area defects include plumbing system, cabinets, countertops, appliances, electrical systems, structure and finishes, life safety equipment, heating, ventilation, and cooling, and other. Exterior defects include fire escapes, foundation and slabs, roof and roof systems, and walls. Health and safety defects include air quality, electrical hazards, egresses, flammable and combustible materials, garbage and debris, structural hazards, sharp edges, tripping infestations, and lead-based paint. So if we look at the inspection, and this here is an inspection, it'll have when it was inspected, the date, the email, what type of inspection, the inspection code, if it completed, if it passed, what the deficiencies were, and like I said, it walks you through and it's going to have that picture on there. When it is done, all that should be cleared up and it should say pass. The inspection process on the web works in a similar fashion, but as you'd see, this screen shows all of those and it's going to be going through each one. Again, the web version, you can upload the pictures, you can enter inspections, and you can run a lot of different reports that become much more detailed to your office's needs, your board's needs, and maybe the HUD's. The electronic inspections overall reduced public housing authorities' costs by going out and doing the inspections proper the first time. But having those devices, you're able to email the inspection reports instead of mailing them. It also means they have a consistent inspection, safer homes, and increased transparency. Electronic inspections, the voucher inspections previously were not tracked by HUD as we discussed. The records will have an address, city, the fail items, and when it was transmitted once the inspection is completed. That inspection information is stored by the federal government and it creates a unit history and it creates reports that then Congress and HUD can look at. It provides immediate information on the inspection sent to HUD systems. So once it is uploaded and synced, that information is already at HUD. It creates generated HUD reports to those HUD systems. It creates immediate reports that you're able to pull. And again, Congress can monitor this. In North Dakota, there are demonstration sites across the state. Great Plains Housing, Dickey Sargent Housing, Eddy County Housing, Cass County, Richland County, Stark County, and Trail County Housing are using UPCSV. Again, it's a mandated change by HUD to implement a single inspection protocol. So now HUD wants to inspire all of us. Inspire is national standards for the physical inspection of real estate. This is a new type of inspection to replace REAC. Again, HUD wants to go with one inspection. Much of this, as a person will look at, the timeline for looking at the inspections, how it's going to work, how long this will be out. This is a 2-year process, and HUD is currently looking for pilot agencies. Again, the software and decision trees are going to be very much like UPCSV. Since UPCSV used a standard of International Building Code, REAC, or now would be known as Inspire, wants to do the same. Congress wants one inspection. And as we look at things, Inspire moves the UPCSV to public housing. And we look at 2021 or 2022 to bring that national inspection change. HUD had hoped to have all housing authorities with voucher programs on UPCSV earlier. However, it made more sense to move the other programs to the newer type, or Inspire or UPCSV, to that newer type of inspection all at one time to reduce any confusion and provide a single time of inspection training for housing providers. Let's look at a few common inspection changes that people will need to be aware of. The first item was something that is in the International Building Code for many years, but probably is not enforced that heavily among newer construction or even older construction. And that is to have the GFCI outlets or protected circuits. These are required within 3 feet of water. These are the outlets, and what you see that have 2 little buttons on them, one to trip it and one to test it. The same thing can be found in the circuit box if there happens to be a circuit protecting it rather than putting the outlets in. That may happen if the outlets are unable to be swapped out, as they might require some additional room, and it might be easier for a owner to just have the breaker switched. This does require a person to have access to the breaker box to check it out. These outlets are supposed to be within 3 feet of water. That means anywhere where there is a sink, bathtub, washer should be within that 3 feet. Water heater as well, if there happens to be an outlet, an arched outlet within the area of that water heater. These are to help prevent any type of shock that may result from water splash or a device that falls into water. Another item to pay much more closer attention to that has been on the HQS inspections and others, but quite often isn't always checked as heavily as it should be, and that is the bathroom ventilation. It must work. Sometimes you see some of these fans might be hanging low, as in this picture, and that was because the person had recently just plugged it back in. It made noise. Some of them may make noise, some of them actually, the big problem is they need to be cleaned. The ventilation helps reduce mold and mildew issues that happens within bathrooms because of that steam, because of that moisture, and it will help reduce any water or ice damage. This actually can happen to the above sheetrock depending on how close, if it's a single family house or the top level. Sometimes the water condenses within the sheetrock and actually can cause some water damage from the inside and ice buildup because of cold air within the attic. They are required. They may require cleaning, so they have to be taken down and cleaned. Some of them probably have not been cleaned in a long time. The other option that HUD does have is that is there an open window or a window that can be opened to help release air. That is acceptable, but it's not preferred, especially in North Dakota, where opening the window in the winter may actually cause lots more damage because of the cold air. It may actually cause damage if it's left open, and it causes a security issue. So it's not the preferred option. In older homes that cannot have ventilation, or an older apartment complex that might not be something preferred, that is something for the building inspectors, city, and even HUD to take a look at what could be passable or what could be added in to help control that moisture. That's between those groups to find out and discuss. Obviously, in North Dakota, we have limited abilities to have some additional types of airflow within bathrooms. The other one that is often missed in other inspections, but is required and has been required by code for many years, is a carbon monoxide detector. These are required whenever there's an open flame device. That means having any gas, propane, oil furnaces, wood or corn stoves, as some people may have them, but also if there's gas appliances such as a gas dryer, gas stove, carbon monoxide detectors are required. This might also apply if a person may have a generator or the building has a generator nearby to have a carbon monoxide detector there. Much like smoke detectors, a carbon monoxide alarm, the devices only last for about 5 to 10 years and do need to be replaced. Not just the battery, the actual alarm may start malfunctioning and need to be replaced. So it's a good thing that a landlord or the tenant write on the back when it was installed and when the batteries were installed. One thing we have seen happening quite often with both a carbon monoxide detector and a smoke detector is the newer batteries cannot be replaced. They're not just a standard 9-volt, they're a different type of battery. But if it is a 9-volt battery, to take a piece of masking tape and put around that battery and write the date that it was installed. And so it makes it easier to take a look at when it was installed and when it might need to be changed. There are a couple of issues that we do need to be aware of and watch in North Dakota. Radon is one. North Dakota has very high radon levels, and radon is a natural gas that may seep up and does not have any other area to go. Radon is something that can be lethal, and people need to be aware of it. There are testing kits that a person can purchase to take a look at what the radon levels are in your home. There are different ways to mitigate radon, and for that, people should be visiting with a contractor or somebody from the Department of Environmental Quality. Another item to watch are sump pumps. Many homes within North Dakota have sump pumps pumping out water. Make sure that they work. The person knows that they work, that there aren't any issues with the sump pump leaking, but also that wherever this sump pump is pushing out water, that it is pushed far enough away from the foundation that it is not causing additional issues. Sometimes if sump pumps are not correctly looked at, that there could be issues of mold and moisture within the home, but also that moisture, backflows within other areas. Some pumps, if they don't have a valve or somehow that it is closed off, that other mice and other rodents may get into the home. So it's always something to watch, take a look at. If you know that there's a sump pump there, do check that it is flowing out and away from the residence. Cities do not allow sump pumps to be piped back into the city drain or into your septic system. They should be pumped away from the residence. The federal government has many reasons for its change. Healthier units mean healthier lives. Healthier units help economies. As people are always reinvesting into that, it gives people the opportunity to better their lives, go out and join the workforce. It also means that those children are less likely to be having issues at school, less likely to be involved with crime, and keeping those economies healthier. It means vibrant communities. Housing is a direct reflection of your community. If the housing stock is very poor, newer employees are less likely to take a job in the communities. They're less likely to reside in the communities, or less likely to be long-term residents. There are some additional HUD resources from UPCSV, as a person can go on these links. If you type in ISDV or if you type in UPCSV into webs or to web searches, you should be able to find that information. Again, look for information that is directly from HUD, not from other organizations. The same thing is with Inspire. Look for HUD direct information, not information from other companies, as you want to be able to learn directly from HUD how they were handling things, not how to cheat the systems, but how to create healthier units and utilize these new systems and trainings for the betterment of your own agency and your clients. Again, thank you. Hope you feel inspired as we look at the various changes coming to many housing authorities and housing providers across the country. The inspection process will be changing if it hasn't already changed. The UPCSV is a start. Inspire is another start. And I think as we look at it, we'll end up with eventually one name for all of these inspections. But it is very inspiring change for many of us and as housing providers to see that there are methods that we can improve the lives of many by relooking at how we handle inspections and what unit health actually means to a person. Again, this video is help sponsored by North Dakota Housing and Finance Agency. Look them up online at ndhfa.org and Great Plains Housing Authority, greatplainsha.com.